Hey, deserving listeners, 90 Day Fiancé. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor. Keep in mind that everything I say in reaction to these videos is completely speculative, based on very little information. Let's watch.
I was focused on the paintings and enjoying the moments, and I wanted to enjoy with me what we do. But as she kept pushing me, I get anger and lost control and said some mean things. And now, Debbie says that I am with her only for the visa, but this is not true.
Okay, so it did kind of look like that. It was really over the top what he was doing. So it's possible. Now, if he is in it just for the visa or mostly for the visa, would a con artist like that say something like this to recover? Yeah, they probably would. But it did kind of look like that. It looked like he was just exaggerating something. Like the things that he said are not, if you're truly a con artist and you're truly just in it for the visa and you're truly trying to just find someone to marry and you don't care about the person at all, then you'd think you would have said something different. He would have said like, oh, you're just pressuring me so much, I just need some time, or how come you don't want to go to the States, or something like that. But he just really went for it and was saying like, yeah, I'm a monster and I only wanted it for the visa. I never loved you. I can't remember what he said, but it was basically that. And I just thought, that doesn't sound like someone that is conning. It sounds like someone that is angry and overreacting. And I think Oussama has some issues with socializing and knowing how to navigate things, knowing what to say. So it would fit with that. And okay. So this, if it's true, we haven't seen a lot of Oussama and his backstory or what his issues are, but I could see a world in which Oussama, one of his main traumas is what he's referring to right now, that trigger of being pressured, to make a choice. Maybe his parents have pressured him, or kids at school, or teachers, or something, and he has a lot of trauma about growing up, about being responsible or something, and he just wants to paint. Just let me paint. I just want to do that. So, who knows? Now, I'm guessing y'all know, because I've only seen up to this point. Y'all have probably watched the full season and whatever after interviews there have been. So, I'm ignorant to the true story, but so I guess let's watch.
دابا عاد فهمت. دونك انت ملي كان عندكم اصلا بلون ديال نتوما من نهار تعرفتوا نتوما دايرين انكم غادي تعيشوا في يو اس اي. يعني دابا ملي جاك هذا البلون هذا جديد ديال انكم تعيشوا في المغرب،
هذا هو البلان. باش عارفاني فهمت انا دابا واخا عندي شويه الفلوس ما عنديش ديك بزاف ديال الفلوس.
Okay, we're hearing again from a family member that Oussama has been desperate to move to the U.S. for a long time, even seemingly prior to meeting Debbie at all. So that doesn't help the situation with regards to how we see Oussama's motivations. But I think what Oussama is saying is, yeah, that was a goal, and I do genuinely care about Debbie. He said something earlier that I want to highlight. He said, I thought that when Debbie read my words, my poetry, that she understood me. And I think that means a lot to him. And I think he often feels misunderstood. I wonder if that's, again, part of his trauma and part of why he is attracted to her. They're kindred spirits in their way. Debbie has a particular way of seeing the world. You could argue that they just are fantasizing about understanding each other when they don't really understand each other. But you could also see a world in which both of their quirky minds understand each other in a way that is rare for them.
صافي هي بدات تضغط خاصنا نمشيو لابابا، خاصنا نمشيو ابارطمون كذا، هادشي اللي تيخليني بعد الله صافي ما تعصبش.
واش انت اصلا ما باغيش من داخل ديالك انك فهمتي تسكن معاك هنا في المغرب؟
بزاف د الحوايج. انا البوين ديالي هو اني نولي شاعر ولا فنان ولا نلقى رسم.
Yeah, he keeps saying this. I hope someone explains to him the economic reality of becoming a professional poet, painter, artist. It's not easy. And even if you are talented, there are so many talented artists out there that it's just hard to make a living. And even when you do kind of eke out a living, it's a hustle. You have to really be, it's a lot of work. You have to be constant. It's a lot of business stuff, right? So it's not all just creating art. If you could just create art and make a living, then that would be great, but that's often not the case. For a lot of artists, it's like 5% making art and 95% the business side of things, the marketing, the social media, the events, entering into contests, the packaging, it's just a lot of things. Anyway, so I hope that someone explains that to him so that he can orient his life accordingly. But who knows, maybe there is, you could, if you were willing to live very modestly, there's a possibility, especially being on the show. I mean, some people might literally buy his stuff just because he's on the show. I mean, who knows? Maybe that's already happening. I don't know. There's been other people on the show who have done things like that. But I want to get back to something I was saying earlier that I don't know if I've talked about before, but is important for me to highlight, which is that a big part of love, I think, is understanding each other. People often phrase it differently, but sometimes they'll phrase it that way, right? Like, I feel like he really just gets me in a way that other people don't. Or sometimes when we're in a relationship, we don't feel understood by our partners. That'll be a big concern. Or we might meet someone that does understand us, and it'll be a compelling motivation for an affair, or hopefully a motivation to address your relationship with your current partner and maybe break up. But that idea of understanding each other, I feel like that's not emphasized enough. There's a lot of rom-coms and a lot of notions of attraction and compatibility that are bandied about in our culture, and I feel like that feeling of understanding, as evidenced by the fact that I think a lot of people would look at Oussama and Debbie, and do look at Oussama and Debbie, and say, like, what is going on with this relationship here? It doesn't make any sense. But it could be that they deeply fall in love with each other because they understand each other in a way that is rare, as I was saying earlier. They might not have ever met someone that understands them, that reflects back to them an indication that they get you. And that's really important. And think about for yourself. Do people get you? Do people understand you? And how do we gauge that exactly? There are two dimensions that I can think of off the top of my head. One is that when you're talking to them, do they indicate that they understand? That when they respond to you, either by literally just paraphrasing what you said, or the way that they respond, it's clear they understand you. So that's one level of understanding. That's easier to maybe identify. But I think another dimension to look at is, does your person, your partner, your friend, your family member, do they predict well about how you will act, or do they interpret you well? So there's one thing about just communicating. I say something and then it's indicated that someone understands me. It's another thing when someone knows you so well that you don't even have to indicate to them for them to basically know or guess how you would feel, or what you would want, or what's going on with you, what's going on deep with you. Maybe that's another third dimension, is that, do you feel deeply understood, deeply known, deeply safe enough to be able to talk about whatever is deep down there? So that's another layer to this, right? Is safety, to put yourself out there to be understood, right? I think this is a central feature of attachment, and a central feature of our survival, is being able to be understood. We can imagine that we might have evolved actually to highlight that, to value that, right? Because it's not directly, in terms of our current lives, correlated with survival. You wouldn't necessarily need people to deeply understand, but you could imagine back in, before, and in other societies where you depend on each other in a very real physical way, that you really would benefit by having people that you both understand, and they understand you deeply. So I hope that you have that in your life. I do. I feel like me and my wife and my best friends and my family members. And I think a big part of that is the cultivation of long-term relationships. It takes a long time to develop that. Also, the cultivation of a relationship that has a lot of vulnerability, a lot of giving each other benefit of the doubt. I don't always understand everything that's happening, and I don't always feel understood. But in general, just a quick inventory, I don't feel like there's a deficit there. I have felt that before. In fact, you could argue that's what landed me in therapy when I was 19 years old, was that I was in college and spending all my time with friends that I was living with or otherwise in college. And I remember just not feeling understood by the guys around me. And so I thought, hey, you know, I had a friend that had gone to therapy with a therapist at what we call Hall Health, which was a University of Washington health center. And it was cheap. I think it was like $15 a session or something. It's like, oh, I might be able to afford that. And so I went to a therapist. The therapist was not good. The therapist was this classic psychoanalyst who never said anything and sat behind a desk. I sat against the wall in this kind of small, like almost like a school chair or something, near the door. And then there was room in the office and then a desk. And then he sat on the other side of the desk and there was windows behind him. And I would talk and he would say, oh, go on. And I'd be like, and after a while, several sessions in, I'm just like, so what do you think about all this stuff? And he's like, well, what do you want me to think about it? And I didn't know at the time that there were different kinds of therapists, and he was fine and it wasn't problematic, but it wasn't extremely helpful. But it did spark an interest in me that would later grow into the idea that would pop into my head in 1994. Well, so in terms of years, that would have been like 4 years later, that I suddenly was like, huh, maybe I'll be a therapist. And I'm thinking that if I hadn't been in therapy prior, it might not have popped into my head, but it might have. Anyway, point is that maybe my whole career is based on this experience of not being understood and wanting to be understood, and maybe feeling a little bit understood by that therapist, and also wanting to understand other people. All right, well, if you want to stay up to date on certain things on this channel, you can go to the community tab on our channel page, and there are posts and polls and other kinds of things there if you're interested. Sometimes people don't see those things, and their feed, it doesn't post on their feed I don't know how YouTube works that. So sometimes you have to go directly there if you're interested. And everyone, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.